Welcome back, everyone, to another day in the life of a military wife. So, have you ever had the experience where someone did something that hurt your feelings or was offensive or rude, just hurtful in any way, and then when they go to apologize, it just doesn't feel sincere? It doesn't feel like they really mean it. I think everyone has experienced that in their life. And then on the reverse side, where you've genuinely made a mistake and you really want to fix it, but the other person just doesn't seem to believe that you want to fix it. Part of that is because we have different ways of recognizing a sincere apology. There are different methods and things that people identify inherently as sincere and things that they don't recognize as a sincere apology. And it's slightly different combinations for everyone. But the people who did the 5 love language stuff have also identified 5 forms of apology, or 5 apology languages, ways of saying I'm sorry. And I want to talk about that. I have really enjoyed learning about it, and I want to share it with you. So, as always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife. So, let's talk about it. When I first learned about the love languages and stuff, I found it really fascinating. And when we got into stuff more in some of my college classes, the love languages are a slight oversimplification of the concept, but at the same time, it's an approachable way for the average person to understand the topic matter. And in the same case, there is a slight simplification of this communicating apology and remorse. But at the same time, I feel like it's a really helpful tool to get started for people and to start identifying even the concept. So I want to kind of talk about how I ran into this first, and then I'll dive into what those different forms are. So military life is crazy and hectic, and it's stressful, and it puts strain on every relationship, but specifically the marriage relationship. And there was a point where my husband had been gone for a while on a hardship tour, and he came back, and we were struggling as a couple and as a family with reintegration because he had missed so much that getting back into the swing of things as a couple and as a family was taking a little bit more work. And we were kind of running into this same issue where we were struggling to accept and understand each other's apologies for when we were making mistakes, because mistakes are going to happen, and especially in a relationship. And so we decided to go and talk to an MFLAC. And the MFLAC was really awesome and pointed us towards the When Sorry Isn't Enough book, which is about the 5 different forms of apology and everything, and had us take the quiz in the back and read it. And I love this book so much that I've actually given out copies of it. It's another one. I have not given out as many copies of this book as the juggling one. The Beyond Juggling and some of the other ones. But still, I've given out quite a few of these. The Boundaries and Beyond Juggling, I just think, are my favorites. But this is also a really good one. And I feel like this is turning into a slight my favorite self-help books review. But at the same time, whatever works. So with that, I want to kind of start breaking down the 5 different ones. And the 5 different languages are genuinely repent, express regret, accept responsibility, make restitution, request forgiveness. And So, genuinely repent is the first one I'm going to go over. And it it is basically what it sounds like. Most people who have got some sort of religious background have encountered the word repent before. Genuinely repent means basically that you want the person needs you to see, or you need to show. It's showing that you recognize that you did something wrong and that you want to make a dedicated plan to change it, and that you verbalize that desire to change and then you actively work on it. So there are individuals, and I'm one of those people that this is one of the ones that I recognize as more of a sincere apology, is when someone hurts my feelings and they not only say, hey, I was wrong, but this is what I'm going to do in the future to not, to fix it. Like, this is how I'm going to fix it now, or this is how I'm going to avoid this in the future. And I really appreciate that. That one's one that, resonates with me. Different ones resonate with different people, but it's important to remember that the change is hard. Just because that is the type of apology that you recognize doesn't mean that if they fail at it the first 2, 3, 4, 500 times, that they're not sincerely trying. And so for people who recognize this as their sincere form of apology, they have to recognize also that their loved ones may not be able to change it, or may slip up in those changes and working on it, and have some compassion and that with it. But that's the first one. It's genuinely repent. The second one is expressing regret. Or at least I'm doing it in a slightly different order than the book does, but bear with me on this one. Expressing regret means that you're using words like these people listen for things like I'm sorry. And there's no need for really an explanation or just going into that. There's times where I feel like people will just start giving a whole huge backstory, and it feels like they're making more excuses sometimes. And so sometimes really all people want to hear is I'm sorry. And also that the body language is important. And it's not just a verbal saying I'm sorry, but it's a body language expression as well. But that being said, there are people who hear I'm sorry and immediately shut down. They just don't recognize I'm sorry as a legitimate form of apology. And I'm actually one of those people, because I've heard I'm sorry so many times growing up from people, and it just never felt sincere. It never felt like they really meant it. And so I've kind of just write it off. It doesn't feel sincere to me. And I hadn't even recognized that this had developed over my lifetime. It wasn't until we started working on this, my husband and I, and going through and learning all about this, that I realized there was a member of my family who their primary way of expressing an apology was the expression of regret, the saying I'm sorry. And to me, I just did not even recognize that as a sincere apology. And our relationship was almost completely non-functional. Like, we never really talked. We didn't get along. It was non-existent. And because I didn't recognize any of their apologies as sincere. And when I realized that, it was literally like just mind-blowing for me, because I had to step back and I had to reflect, and I had to think that, you know what, maybe this whole time, all these years, they genuinely have been trying to genuinely apologize. And because that form of apology doesn't feel sincere to me, and they didn't know it, and I didn't even really understand, I just didn't accept it. And so I was resentful and had all these negative feelings, which was not helpful because I wasn't forgiving them. I wasn't letting it go. I wasn't. And so it helped me realize there was kind of two sides to this. And I had the opportunity to go back to that family member and explain, hey, I've been learning things and trying to improve as a person, and I've come to realize that I think your primary form of expressing apologies is just not one that I recognize as a sincere form of apology. And that's not your fault. That is a misunderstanding. And what I have been seeing is a lack of sincerity. Probably hasn't been. And I want to say sorry for that. It wasn't intentional. But at the same time, it was on my part. And that changed our relationship. It was a complete groundbreaker for us. It really helped a lot with the moving on and kind of healing a lot of the hurts that had happened. So the next one is accepting responsibility. For this one, basically they want to hear, I'm wrong. They want to hear someone admit that they know that they did something that was not right. And there are people who really struggle with saying those words, that really struggle with saying, I'm wrong. And if that's the form of sincere apology that your spouse or family recognize, it's going to take some humility and work, but it's, I think, worth it. But anyway, no one likes to admit that no one really wants to admit that. And admitting that it is your fault is difficult. And so it's important to make sure that if it's something you struggle with, if saying I'm wrong and admitting fault is something you struggle with, that you're able to do it sincerely, and that your body language, again, body language is a huge thing, is able to express that. Because if you are saying it reservedly or uncomfortably, it's going to also impact whether or not the other person recognizes it as sincere. And so that's something to take into consideration with this one. But you could, one of the main parts with this one is there's a lot of times where people will go into these big, long, wordy explanations or apologies or whatnot, and they'll forget some of these trigger words, these key things that those people are kind of subconsciously listening for. Previously with the other one, it was I'm sorry, and this one it's I'm wrong. I was wrong. And so making sure that we're used to kind of putting those phrases in to our apologies. And I'll get into combining and stuff a little bit more later. But the next one is making restitution. So in our society, we often we think that things need to be fixed. If someone does something wrong, they need to fix it. And this one is, again, really top on mine. I don't always expect people to fix things, but I really appreciate it when people show the desire to fix something. So one of the examples that has been given for this one is, like, for example, if you have friends over and one of their kids breaks something, probably wouldn't expect them to replace it, but just the fact that they would be genuinely willing to, means a lot to me. Or there has been times where one of my kids has damaged something at someone else's house, and we have replaced it or offered to replace it. Just because to me that feels like the appropriate thing to do. Again, I don't often actually expect people to, replace those things. But to me, that just, it shows an extra level of sincerity. Or maybe another thing would be is if someone said in a work environment, a coworker like demeaned you in front of a group of peers, that they could then, in front of those same group of peers, make a public apology saying, hey, the way I treated them wasn't right, and I want you all to know that I respect them and whatever. Again, different people, different things that they feel are sincere. So, but oftentimes with people who really feel they resonate strongly with the whole restitution thing. Those words, I'm sorry and I was wrong, which work so well for the other two, don't really mean much to them. And so it's just finding that balance in the way we use our genuine apologies. The last one is requesting forgiveness. And that one is kind of self-explanatory, but I'm going to dig into it anyway. When you're wanting forgiveness, but requesting forgiveness, so this one, again, it differs for different people. I know quite a few people that they want you to ask for forgiveness. That's really important to them. Me, it's never been as big of a, deal. I will forgive or I won't forgive, and it really doesn't matter if you ask me to. I'm going to try. I try to forgive. I really do try to forgive people. But it's just whether or not they ask, and it has never really mattered much. I appreciate it. If someone does ask me to forgive them, that's fine. But I don't expect it. It's not the end of the world if they don't. But some people really do want to hear that. They want to hear I'm sorry, or they want to hear, will you please forgive me? But it's important that it's not demanding forgiveness. Like, you're not absolutely like, you must forgive me right now, because then that's adding insult to injury. People forgive on their own time. So requesting forgiveness, you have to be ready for them and willing to accept the fact that they might say they're not ready to forgive you. And that really has happened a couple times with people who very seriously hurt my feelings. I had to say, do you know what? I am working towards it, and hopefully someday I will, but I'm not there yet. What you did still hurts me very much, and I'm still working through it. And it's okay. It's okay to admit that you're still working through it. I mean, hopefully you really genuinely are trying to still work through it, and you're not just holding on to it, because I don't know. I always remembered one of my youth leaders when I was young said to me that holding a grudge was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I think that's true. When we willfully choose to just not forgive someone, that in the end will do more damage to us than it will to them. And I've honestly seen that in my life. Like I said, there's been some people who have hurt me rather deeply, and it has taken a long time to be able to genuinely release that hurt and let go and forgive. And those moments when you finally actually do that, it's like this huge weight is lifted off of your shoulders, and it's this immense sense of freedom, to not feel like the victim or the injured person anymore, to just be liberated from that pain. So there really, to me, is this one really resounds. It resonates with me. But yeah, so that's that main one, is that a lot of people, they just have a hard time asking for forgiveness. It's not always something that people have been taught to do. So maybe that's one of the ones that you struggle with, and it's one you're going to have to work on. But again, it's different for everyone. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses with all of these. And basically what I kind of want to point out was the takeaway I got from all of this was we never know what the apology language of the person we are interacting with is, especially if it's a stranger or like someone at a public event or restaurant or whatever. We don't always know. Even heck, we don't even always know family members what theirs is going to be. And so the more comfortable we are with all of these different forms of apology, and the more we're comfortable naturally including as many of them as possible into an apology, the more likely we are to be able to properly express our sincerity to the person we're apologizing to. And that said, also, it's important to recognize that because I took this quiz almost 2 years ago, and then I took it again when I was prepping for this. And when I took it 2 years ago, I did not at all completely, like, zero recognition of I'm sorry, like just none. But that acknowledgement, that wakening up to the fact that that was just a blind spot, I did not recognize that as a sincere apology, has helped me to stop and analyze when someone says, I'm sorry. Does it feel like they're really trying to convey it, even if maybe it's not something I would normally recognize? Because maybe for them that's sincere and they don't know any other way of apologizing. And so being open-minded and accepting the fact that maybe someone else's form of apology is not one that you would normally recognize as sincere, but that doesn't technically make it insincere. So it was a huge mind-blowing like growth experience for me learning this. And as I was contemplating what I wanted to share, piggybacking on all of the other things I have been talking about the last 2 weeks, I kind of wanted to address this because to me, this is a practical example of how helpful MFLAC can be. I've talked about military family life counselors before, and they definitely have a place. If you are needing something more like a therapist or a counselor, go pursue those. Those are important too. There's places for psychologists and counselors and therapists and all that. But military family life counselors, I'm actually, there are counselors anyway. Misspeak. Anyway, but the reason why this is so... It's just because they teach different skills. They have different resources. They've got different focuses. That's also one reason why I love the chaplains so much. You can get different resources and different types of help through each one of these different organizations. And I think that is one of the great reasons why, as a military family, I appreciate the variety of resources we have for relationship and mental health, because this is not an easy lifestyle. It's not a typical situation. There's a lot of stress and strains and things that military families and spouses, couples go through that are atypical in regards to a normal family experience. And so having a wide variety of resources that can assist in a wide variety of ways is huge. And this was one that really impacted my husband and I's relationship a lot. And not only that, but it has allowed me to reevaluate my relationships with those around me and start teaching this to my kids. Because when we're the ones teaching our kids how to apologize. And so if I can start equipping them now with the understanding that there's lots of different ways of expressing sincere apology and that people recognize different things as a sincere apology, the better equipped they're going to be as adults to handle these sorts of situations. So I really enjoyed this one. Again, it's a very accessible and approachable method of breaking down this concept. And again, there's a lot more depth and stuff you can go into with this, but most people this isn't their career, and so they need something that is more concise and clear cut. So I think this is a really well done resource, and I would encourage people to go and take the quiz, find out what your apology languages are, because the other thing I love about when you take the quiz, especially online, is it breaks it down to percentages. So it's a combination. Everyone's gonna have a slightly different, like, unique combination of ones that they recognize and ones they don't recognize, and they'll have their number 1, their number 2, number 3. Like, they'll have a different mixture of each of all of the 5. And the more you understand those, the better off you'll be. And expressing it as a couple, that was one of the things I loved the best. Was I took it, my husband took it, and then we kind of talked about our results. And it was really helpful in our relationship to know what the other person recognizes as a sincere apology. And ironically enough, one of the ones that I just did not, like, they were on my bottom, was one of my husband's top. And that was part of the struggle we were having. So I'm really this was a huge blessing. And I hope that you take the time to go and look at this resource and take the quiz yourself, find out what it is, share it with your spouse. Hey, it could be a nice little, stay in date night or long distance date night, because we've talked about those before. To just take it, because you don't have to be in the same place to take the quiz, and then you could talk about it over Zoom or, Duo or whatever FaceTime thing you use to video chat, and have it be a nice little long distance date. So that said, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife.